It's generally accepted in the universe that gods aren't real, or if they are, they do nothing. There's still the odd crackpot, or super devout species, but almost every spacefarer doesn't believe in gods. It's a rare, almost unique creature that believes in some deity and can handle the truths of the void. Commander Jerry, whose actual name was an unpronounceable mess of clicks and high-pitched chitters, was concerned. He had set about doing an inspection of his ship and found significant irregularities in engineering. He'd recently taken on a new head engineer, a new species that had recently joined the galactic community. When the human engineer had joined the crew, there'd been a few days of oddities, but that was always to occur with a new head officer. The human had often arrived in his work overalls and marred with oil or other grime, always with a tool in hand fixing something or other. Once the human got everything ship-shape, as he called it, the engineering bay was running smoothly again, often outperforming the time it was under the old head engineer. The human, however, was strange. He wore a ring on his little finger, and often talked about God in regards to the engines and if they'd work. They almost always did, and the times they didn't, he'd fix them fast enough for it not to matter. When he'd questioned the human on the ring, all he'd received as a response was muttering about a binding of honor and iron. The commander was starting to think that the human engineer was religious. The real concern was the fact that in an unused corner of the engineering bay was a small shrine, a simple thing made of scrap metal and rivets. There was no god there, nor religious symbol, but rather a few cogs, an ancient spanner and a simple inscription, repeated in each language of the engineering crew. Between them and the void, we stand. Things got even more peculiar when the captain noticed that any time one of the engineering crew passed the shrine, they would reach out and touch the cowling of the section on which those words were written. Eventually, he managed to ask one of the lesser engineers what it was about. The engineer shrugged and told him, "Chief set it up, it works." Didn't ask him why or how, but it makes sense. Before scuttling off to attend to a task or other. Things kept getting more and more confusing when he heard the engineers referring to the ship as she, and talking about it as if it was a living thing. He knew that there was no living being that was fused to the ship, and the ship was wholly machine, no biology. There wasn't even an AI. The commander continued to wonder about engineering, confused and concerned for his engineering crew. He was rudely shaken from his wondering when he was yelled at to move or be moved. He turned to scold whoever would dare yell at their ship's commander, only to meet the eyes of the human head of engineering. He got halfway through the first 2 words of the scolding when he was silenced by a threatening wave of a screwdriver. "You rule up on the bridge, but I reign down here. Now, what's the commander doing down here?" he asked as he set about tightening a screw that held a pipe to the wall. The commander stood, stunned for a few seconds, more than long enough for the head engineer to finish what he was doing and head over to the next job, passing by the shrine on his way, the clink of his ring on the scrap metal shrine brining the captain out his stunned silence. The final straw was when one of the valves started to hiss and spit, emitting a small spray of ion plasma. The head engineer picked up the spanner from the shrine and gave the valve a light bash. It instantly stopped venting and resumed standard operation. The spanner was returned to the shrine with an odd level of reverence. He decided that he wouldn't question the human engineer's methods, so long as it worked. He didn't mind. It slowly became common knowledge among spacefaring species that human engineers, and sometimes other crew members, but mostly engineers, were religious. All the engineers worshipped the same god. The shrines were all different. All had different inscriptions. Some reading things like, "Nothing beyond the engineer but God," others more cryptic. The sacred trust, they rarely understand. A few things, however, were universally common. Every human engineer had the supernatural ability to fix things by bashing them or by simply restarting them. And whatever this religion was, it was convincing enough to often convert other members of the engineering crew. It seemed this god may actually exist when other species engineers started to develop the same talents, to fix things by bashing them after working with the humans and following the same rites and rituals. Eventually, the god just got called the god of the engineer, and it became accepted that the engine room were the temples. The most curious part of this religion was treating the ship like a living thing, learning that she, for it was always a she, and she was even sometimes their mistress, had moods, and those moods were as important, if not more so, than the moods of the captain. Whenever pressed to explain, the humans would answer in vagaries or look confused and ask the questioner if they couldn't feel it. The same answers came from other engineers that had taken to this religion. It was the first time that a religion survived the challenges of the void and crossed species.